Hello, I'm Clive Paget and I'm the features editor for Musical America. On today's one-on-one, I'm going to be talking to Graham Vick. As well as being an international opera director, Graham is the founder and artistic director of UK-based Birmingham Opera Company, an arts organisation with an enviable reputation for innovative programming, for challenging preconceptions, and especially for community engagement. We'll be talking about how smaller, more nimble companies have adapted to the pandemic, and in particular, what the future might or indeed should be for opera. Hi, Graham. Great to talk to you.
Clive, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I hope you are too. I wanted to talk a little bit about Birmingham Opera Company and its work. You founded the company right back in 1987. Can you tell us a little bit about the way it thinks about opera and the kind of work that it does?
Yes, for the last 20 years, we've been called up Birmingham Opera Company, and we have developed a method of work in which our productions of opera embrace participants and audience as participants. So we perform with hundreds of people from the city of Birmingham who represent every class, every colour, every religion in the city, as therefore does the audience. We perform not in theatres, we perform in found spaces, empty factory, bank, abandoned ice rink, warehouses. The audience doesn't sit down, the audience is standing, promenade style production in which the audience finds itself at the heart of the performance of the opera. Everybody recognizes themselves either in the actors, they also recognize themselves in the very carefully put together casts of soloists who are deliberately diverse, in the chorus, who are largely volunteer, and in the orchestra.
So I'm presuming, I mean, the figures for the pandemic in Birmingham have been pretty severe. I mean, how has the current crisis affected the company and yourself?
The company was formed out of a personal belief that the large institutions of opera companies were becoming outdated and would at some point become outmoded as too large scale, inflexible, and unable to react swiftly and agile enough to the times. When I did that, I hadn't really expected this particular crisis. But Birmingham Opera Company is 4 people in an office, and all of the money is spent on the work. So we have kept our full staff on for the whole period. We have obviously done a lot of work digitally, as has everybody else. We've managed live performances, pop-up events wherever we can, in supermarkets, in car parks, in shopping centres, as and when the rules have bent sufficiently to allow us to go live. We spent a lot of the time actually working on our next big project, which is next summer, working out new ways to approach that digitally, to develop a better interaction with potential sponsors, which is something I've been able to do much more of now that Zoom has arrived in our lives. So one-on-one and meetings and encounters with myself and Alper Shah, and our music director, are now much easier to set up, and the dialogue is much easier to have. So this is something new that we're able to offer, that we've been developing. And we put some of our more important work out digitally, in particular in relation to Black Lives Matter, which is perhaps as big and important an event this year as COVID. So we put Michael Tippett's The Icebreak out on Opera Vision, and we got 30,000.
Which I watched. I watched the whole of that. I'm a big Tippett fan, and I was so impressed that you'd done it, because it hadn't been done since it was originally written, but B, that you did it in such such extraordinary kind of energy and conviction, and with a remarkable cast and chorus of all sorts of people from all walks of life that you managed to incorporate into the production. I mean, community engagement's obviously been at the very heart of the company right from the start. I'm kind of curious, you must have looked around the world over the last 6 to 9 months and seen what other people are doing and how other people have other opera companies in particular have reacted to the circumstances. What have you seen that you think might be kind of useful for the future, or companies that have done things particularly well?
Well, look, the good companies have been fast on their feet and quick to react. In Berlin, they were in the middle of doing, at the Deutsche Opera, they were in the middle of doing a new production of Rheingold, which they weren't able to do. And they did an hour-and-a-half version of Rheingold, which we, in fact, commissioned in Birmingham, which Jonathan Dell, the composer, and I made, an hour-and-a-half long for an orchestra of 16. They did that in the car park the week they should have been doing the show. There have been a lot of those kind of initiatives which are very lively. There's been, I would say, remarkably little examination, soul searching. I mean, inevitably, and I part of this as much as anybody else, a lot of the weight of the problem of COVID for opera companies has been the enormous amount of unemployment that it has produced. And the large amount of available money that has been spent shoring up crown jewel national institutions. I think that, of course, is inevitable. So a lot of the discussion has been there. And I think the real discussion is what do we do when we come out of it, not how do we cope when we're in it. Ultimately, how we cope when we're in it is short term. Those who are good at crisis management will manage more than others. Those who are secure in their future will, of course, do the least of all, and that is obviously what we've seen. From La Scala to the Met to Covent Garden, those are the places where hardly anything has happened.
So how do you think you will emerge from the pandemic, and how do you think some of those other companies might?
Look, I think what we do is the future. I think what we've witnessed this year in terms of how appallingly divisive, whichever country you happen to be in, our society has become in so many ways, financially, socially, racially, economically, that has been cruelly exposed. I mean, we have no choice but to see that. Coming out of that, we can't then just go back to where we were. We can't, anybody who makes art, whether you're an artist or an enabler, the question we have to ask ourselves is, who are we doing it for? Nothing. It's a non-event, it's not art. But who that audience is very important. And I think there's been historically far too little discussion of who we're trying to make work for. It's clear in Birmingham, of course, because we have now been working for 20 years on finding a model which will engage and include the whole city into our audience. And in order to do that, we've involved them in our performance. It was that way around. And by making participation an essential part of our model, we have opened out a web of connections and recognition that has completely opened out the audience that we get. We have a level playing field. Everybody stands on the same floor. There are no boxes, there's no grand tier, there's no special entrances for top ticket prices, there's no booking for drinks at the bar, there's no, I mean, you get the idea. Everybody's in the same place. And whether you've been to opera all your life or never been before, you're still not going to know what the experience will bring you. That leveling out has been enormously democratic, I think, in a very healthy sense. And of course, our ticket prices are low. We face the same struggle as everybody else coming out of it financially, but our model is no less valid than it was. And our aims are, I think, essential. I don't see how anybody making art coming out of COVID cannot feel the need to speak with everybody and to make sure that the work that they make is accessible to everybody.
So do you think that some of the larger companies are actually having these conversations, even as we speak, within their organizations and thinking that they might follow that kind of lead? Or are you hopeful or pessimistic that they will change?
Experience has taught me not to be too hopeful. However, there is a shift. More lip service will be paid than previously. We have, despite the fact that we've all been talking about diversity for years now, this year there has been a notable shift. I hope that will continue. That's a very positive step forwards out of what's happened this year. On the other hand, a lot of Europe is failing to confront how much the face of Europe is changing. And I mean, you know, Italy, Austria, Germany, Denmark, Sweden, how to invite the new citizens into the cultural offer. How to give them their cultural rights is what one might say.
You have travelled during the pandemic too in Europe, I gather. I mean, how have you found it? I mean, not just society in general, but how have you found opera companies and the way in which their kind of, you know, rehearsals have had to be managed and the way audiences are invited to attend?
I've done two projects in Italy, which was the country that took up. I made various proposals. Italy took me up. We managed a version of Mozart's Zaida with a text by Italo Calvino that I did 40 years ago. We did that in Rome in place of a production that should have been the Rex Progress with Daniele Gatti. And so Daniele and I did Zaida, which has 5 singers and almost no set was the idea, and is set in an empty theatre. So it was imagined for a small audience of 500 or 600, which is what it had in Rome. I then did a version of it in Como for a circuit of 10 theatres. Its first night was Zoom, was sent out on video with an empty theatre. So Italy has been quite bullish. In fact, in July, in the summer festivals, there were Macerata, Torre del Lago, and in Rome there was an opera, Rigoletto, that they built a theatre specially for. So they've been quite bullish, I think, quite a lot of chutzpah in it. They've done, I would say, the best from that point of view. There was obviously a flurry in the summer in England of private country house events, because it was easier to get perform on private land, not on public land. That's why that happened. Private money, private land, high access prices. So that's a kind of market force issue. And I think that's what tells us quite a lot, I think, about the economy of opera, where it is and why we do it.
I just want to ask you very briefly about your kind of digital offering, both with the ice break going out on Opera Vision and the kind of streaming of opera that's kind of going ahead. Do you have a sense of how successful that's been in terms of kind of attracting eyeballs? How many more people might have seen something because it was online?
The ones we put out in the summer was Verdi's Othello, because we sing it in English, in which we had a largely black cast, not only Othello himself, but Iago, Montano, Cassio, and Lodovico. We put that out because I think it's a very interesting moment, and to see that opera sung by those people is to radically change the way you perceive it. We put out the Icebreak of Michael Tippett because we had done it a couple of years ago to celebrate the 30th anniversary of racial uprising, the Handsworth experience in Birmingham. And we'd done that as a citywide project of memory and recall of this extraordinary opera by Michael Tippett from 1976, which saw all this ahead of it. And of course, it's a great opera in itself. And we put out, we've now put out Fidelio, in fact, on Opera Vision, which is an enormous social project about human prisons and the fact that we each make and live in our own prisons. And that seemed to be a piece that was, had found its moment again, even though we made it 18 years ago. So that has a value, but watching, for the other day I watched Fidelio, in fact, and the truth is I'm happy that there's a sort of record of it, but it's not it. It's not what it was, it's not what it is, it's not what I seek to do. And eventually it's not what I believe in. Mm-hmm. So I'm enormously grateful for all of these means to argue, discuss, communicate and talk. But the thing itself, the sum total of experience of all those human beings in one space at one time, by which I mean performers and audience, mm-hmm. the way each and every one of them lives and breathes the moment of each performance is what that work of art is at any point.
Am I getting the impression that from your perspective, you think that, small, agile, more interesting companies like your own will probably come out of the pandemic relatively unscathed, whereas the big traditional productions are probably going to find it more difficult and will be forced to change?
No, I think it's probably the opposite, Clive. I'd love to think that your way was what was going to happen. But, you know, as we see society more and more forget the compassion of the beginning of COVID, and more now just get desperate to be back to normal. Nobody wants really to be back to new. Everybody wants to be back to where we were. It's disappointing, but I think that's what we will see in the big companies. There will be a momentary lip service, but I think ultimately they'll be broke, they'll be stuck for cash, they will be performing in a way that brings in money from the box office, even though they're receiving millions in public subsidy. I think they will be ultimately prioritizing. The middle of the work will be safer, is what I think. And they will continue to do add-ons of community outreach education, as long as it doesn't compromise the precious work in the center. Whereas what we do in Birmingham is the precious work in the center in itself educates, deals with the community, deals with participation and engagement and social impact.
Graham, that's fantastic. Thank you so much. That's really insightful. I wish you all the best for your own career and for the company.
Clive, thank you very much. Good talking to you.
Thank you.